She thought calling the cops would scare a little girl off her own ranch. Said she'd have her taken in 5 minutes. That it was a matter of safety. That she knew the law. What she didn't know, that little girl's father carries the badge she thought would save her. And when the sirens rolled up that day, they didn't take my daughter. They listened to me. Doubt if someone can use the cops to take your child off your land, just because they don't like what they saw, just because they think a ranch girl doesn't belong near horses without permission. What happens when you're not there to stop it? One phone call, 5 minutes. That's all it took. She thought her lie would end with a squad car and a sobbing little girl. It did end with an arrest. Just not the one she expected. It was a quiet afternoon. Midweek, late spring. The kind of slow, sun-drenched day where the only thing louder than the birds was the breeze brushing through corn stalks and fence rails. Out on the far pasture, my daughter was doing what she always did after homeschool hours, brushing down Clover, our youngest mare, and topping off the water troughs. She was 12, independent, kind, smarter than I ever was at that age. She wore her favorite sun hat, boots dusted in dried mud, jeans rolled once at the ankle. Always humming, always focused. My wife used to say she had hands made for both healing and holding. But that day, she barely got past the second stall before it all changed. It started with the crunch of tires on gravel. She thought it was me, or maybe a neighbor, someone who needed directions or a stray dog rounded up. But when she looked up, she didn't see a familiar truck or a waving hand. She saw Karen. Again, this wasn't the first time that woman had crossed our property line. She was the self-proclaimed community enforcer for the Ridge Hill Bluffs HOA, a stretch of identical beige boxes built just down the ridge from our ranch. Karen believed her rules didn't end at her gate. She believed her clipboard gave her power. She believed my land was an eyesore. "Excuse me," she shouted, stepping through the open gate like she owned the grass beneath it. "What do you think you're doing?" My daughter froze, brush in hand, mare halfway into a tail swish. "I'm brushing my horse," she said, polite like I taught her. Karen didn't blink. "That's abuse," she snapped. "That animal's ribs are showing." "She's a rescue," my daughter replied. "She's gaining weight." Karen scoffed. "I've seen enough. There's barbed wire. No sabe. This is child endangerment." Then, and this part my daughter told me later, between shaking breaths and wiped tears, Karen pulled out her phone, started recording her, a 12-year-old girl. "You're not supposed to be out here," Karen said, zooming in. "You're unaccompanied. You're near livestock. That's a safety risk." "I'll live here," my daughter said, her voice cracking. Karen turned the phone to her face and said into the camera, "If no adult arrives in 5 minutes, I'm calling CPS and the police. This child is in a dangerous, unsupervised situation." My daughter tried to call me before that clock hit 5. Hands shaking, she fumbled the phone. Missed once. Dialed again. I was still at the station, halfway through a review session with a rookie deputy when her name flashed on my screen. I answered in one ring. "Daddy." Just that. My gut flipped. She's strong, this girl of mine. She doesn't cry wolf. Doesn't even whimper unless something's bleeding or broken. "What's wrong?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "She's here again. Karen. She's recording me. She says I'm going to get taken away." I stood up so fast my chair nearly flipped backward. "Where is she?" I asked. "By the gate. She has her phone out. She said she's calling the cops." That's when I heard it over the line. Karen's voice, loud and deliberate. "Yes, officer. I need immediate dispatch. A child is in danger on an unregistered rural property." "Yes, that's the address." She'd already made the call. I didn't say another word. Didn't tell my daughter to run. Didn't ask her to hide. I just said, "Stay with Clover. Stay calm. Daddy's coming." I hung up, stepped into my office, and opened the wall locker. Badge, radio, duty belt. I wasn't scheduled for patrol. I didn't care. I threw everything on, marched out, radioed dispatch, and said 6 words. "Hold that call. I am responding personally." The drive to the ranch was 14 minutes. I made it in 8. Sirens silent, lights dark. Just the low rumble of a V8 engine built to move fast when it needed to. I didn't think. I didn't plan a speech. I just replayed her voice in my head. She says I'm going to get taken away. When I pulled up, 2 things hit me at once. First, Karen was standing with her arms crossed at the fence, like she'd caught a fugitive mid-crime. Second, my daughter was trying not to cry, standing beside Clover with her back ramrod straight. She saw me and exhaled like she hadn't been breathing for minutes. Karen turned, saw the cruiser, and grinned. I stepped out. Full uniform, badge gleaming. Karen's smile melted. "You made it fast," she said, like we were friends at brunch. "Glad you're here. I was just explaining to the young lady that it's not safe to be out here alone. There's barbed wire. No saini. Frankly, I am shocked." I held up a hand. "Ma'am," I said, voice level, step away from the fence. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I turned to my daughter. "Sweetheart, you okay?" She nodded, lip trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. "I know," I said. "Come here." She ran to me, and I knelt, gear and all, arms wide. I held her tight. No badge ever mattered more than that moment. Kara huffed behind me. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You can't just take her word for it. She's not even supposed to be." I stood, and when I turned around, every bit of training I had, every ounce of discipline, held back what I really wanted to say. Instead, I reached for my radio. Unit 6 responding, situation resolved. Suspected victim is the landowner's daughter. No crime. Reporting party is not a resident of the property. Silence on the line. Then, copy Unit 6. Canceling response. Karen blinked. "You're the responding officer?" I nodded. "And the father?" She stepped back. "This is a conflict of interest." "No, ma'am," I said. "This is a criminal misuse of emergency services. And a trespassing report if you don't leave my land right now." She did, but not before muttering something about lawyer friends and reviewing this with the board. I didn't care. I walked my daughter inside, made her hot cocoa, sat with her until her hands stopped shaking. Then I kissed her forehead and said gently, "Some people think the loudest one is the strongest, but we don't fight that way. We fight with truth." That night, I didn't sleep much, but I did pull the footage from the front gate camera, and I started a file titled McAllister Incident, Emergency Abuse, because if she thought the story ended with a phone call, she had no idea what was coming next. The next morning wasn't quiet. 2 squad cars rolled up to the ranch around 9:45 a.m. Lights weren't flashing, but the dust trailing behind them felt heavier than usual. Dispatch had honored my cancellation the previous afternoon, but someone, most likely Karen, had filed a follow-up report overnight, forcing the county to review it officially. A concern for child welfare, flagged anonymous. Except we all knew it wasn't anonymous. The first officer to step out was Deputy Morales. Good man. I trained him myself 3 years back. The second, a newer face, Officer Haley from the municipal force, clearly not thrilled to be out on county land. I met them both at the front gate. "Morning, gentlemen," I said, arms relaxed, tone neutral. Morales nodded. "Sheriff, we didn't expect you here." "I live here," I said. "And this whole thing? It's about my daughter." Haley glanced at his notepad. "We have a report stating a minor was found unattended on unlicensed ranch property. There was a mention of dangerous livestock, lack of supervision, and visual signs of animal neglect." I raised an eyebrow. "Did the report also include that the child lives here and the property's registered under my name?" Haley looked uncomfortable. We didn't get that detail." I gestured to the barnyard, where my daughter was brushing Clover again, this time with me, standing 20 feet away. Calm, safe, smiling. "Care to speak with the victim?" I said dry. They agreed. My daughter answered every question clearly, calmly. Told them about Karen arriving uninvited. Told them about being recorded. Told them what she heard Karen say on the phone. Morales gave me a knowing glance. Haley just scribbled. "She was by herself?" he asked. I interjected gently. "She's 12, home-educated, ranch-raised, knows how to deworm a goat and check an electric fence. She was brushing a horse she's cared for since last year." "And the fencing concerns?" Haley asked. "Bot of the white." I pointed to the paddock line. "Standard tension strand, state approved. The only barbed wire we use is on the back slope, near the coyotes. Nowhere near her." Then Morales asked the obvious question. "What prompted the report?" I didn't even hesitate. "Karen McAllister. HOA board member for Ridge Hill Bluffs. They both blinked. Haley jotted the name. She's been here before. I continued. 3 times uninvited. Always with some complaint. Always trying to enforce HOA rules beyond her jurisdiction. Any footage? Morales asked. I've got gate camera timestamps, audio, and voice match from yesterday's call. Plus a full clip of her saying my daughter would be taken away within 5 minutes if I didn't show up. Haley looked up from his notepad. She said that. I nodded. On camera. Want a copy? By noon, both officers had reviewed the footage from my laptop in the living room. Morales' jaw tightened as Karen's voice filled the speakers, clear as day. You don't get to just keep a child out here with horses and no adult. I'm calling CPS. This isn't safe. Then, over the phone, yes, please send someone. I don't care who owns the land. The girl is near livestock and wire fencing. There's probably no water. She looks unsupervised. I'm worried for her safety. And finally, my daughter's quiet voice in the background. Please stop filming me. When the video ended, Morales just exhaled and shook his head. This wasn't concern, he said. This was retaliation. Haley didn't say much. Just took the USB copy I offered and said he'd file the report thoroughly. They left within the hour. But the damage was already spreading. That evening, I checked my inbox. 5 emails from Ridge Hill Bluffs HOA. The first was a formal concern about livestock proximity to neighborhood boundaries. The second accused me of child endangerment by omission. The third said my fencing violated shared environmental standards. The fourth? A thinly veiled threat of civil action if I continued to ignore repeated safety concerns raised by residents. And the fifth, and signed, was just 2 lines. Sheriffs shouldn't be above the law. See you in court. That night, I tucked my daughter into bed with a flashlight and a worn copy of Black Beauty. But when I stepped outside and sat on the porch in the quiet, I wasn't angry. I was done being polite. I spent the next 4 days doing what Karen never expected, investigating her. You see, when someone abuses emergency services to threaten your kid, you don't just react. You build a case. First, I filed a records request through the sheriff's office. 911 call logs within a 5-mile radius of Ridge Hill Bluffs, flagged for child welfare, animal abuse, and unattended minor over the past year. Out of 27 calls, 11 were from one address. For 12, Candlebrush Lane. Karen's. Next, I asked around. Quietly. Neighbor down the road? Said Karen once threatened to report them for having a toddler too close to a hose. A mail carrier? Told me Karen snapped photos of his van for idling too long near children. A teenage dog walker? Claimed Karen screamed at her over a leash length and said she'd make one call and enter summer. Pattern established. Now it was time to tie it together. I pulled HOA minutes from public access archives. The ones Ridge Hill was too lazy to password protect. Turns out, Karen had motioned twice for external enforcement privileges, suggesting Ridge Hill coordinate with local departments for compliance monitoring. Both times rejected. So she took it into her own hands. With her phone, her voice, and her warped version of the law. I drafted a report and filed it under misuse of emergency services, with a sub-request to notify CPS that a known bad faith actor was abusing their intake line. Next, I notified the HOA oversight body and attached video and documentation, citing reckless endangerment, unlawful trespassing, and harassment of a minor. And then, I waited. It didn't take long. The local paper ran a short piece. Sheriff investigates false CPS claims in HOA feud. Child not in danger, says department. Karen's name wasn't printed, but Ridge Hill knew. 2 days later, I got a letter from the HOA's legal team. An apology on behalf of Ridge Hill Bluffs HOA for any unintended stress caused by one member's overstep. It wasn't signed by Karen, because by then, she'd gone silent. But I wasn't done, because Karen hadn't just tried to twist my role as a father. She tried to weaponize mine as a sheriff. And if there's one thing I've learned after 20 years in law enforcement, when someone uses the law like a hammer, you don't swing back. You make sure they never hold the handle again. The law has a rhythm, a measured cadence. And if you know how to follow it, not chase it, not weaponize it, but follow it, it leads you exactly where you need to go. That was my mindset when I walked into the county recorder's office 3 days after Karen called the cops on my daughter. Not angry, not vengeful, just focused, and fully aware that I now had 3 jobs: protect my daughter, protect my ranch, and stop Karen from ever doing this to anyone else again. Step 1 was simple: gather every piece of paper with Karen's name on it. I started with the 911 call logs I'd flagged earlier. Over the past 12 months, she called CPS or emergency services 11 times. Each complaint vague, each call closed without action. One report said a neighbor was housing too many dogs. Another flagged a father for allowing minors near heavy machinery. A third accused a Hispanic family of loud yelling and signs of violence. Turned out they were celebrating a quinceañera. Pattern: bigotry dressed as concern. Motive: control. I highlighted every name on those reports, then made phone calls. First was Mr. Ortega, the man Karen accused of unsafe gardening tools. He answered on the third ring. "I know it was her," he said immediately. "She told me she was going to report me if I didn't remove the cacti from the shared fence line." 2 days later, CPS was at my door. Next was the Patel family. They told me Karen once left a note in their mailbox that read, "Just because you're new doesn't mean the rules don't apply." They'd lived there for 9 years. One by one, the stories stacked. All different. All the same ending. No findings. No evidence. No consequences. Until now. Step 2. Build the formal complaint. I documented every piece. Her trespass on my land, camera footage. Her false statements to dispatch, 911 transcript. Her threats to my daughter, "You'll be taken in 5 minutes." Her history of abuse across the HOA, testimonies, incident logs. I laid them out like a case file. Chronological, unemotional, irrefutable. Then I walked it right into the district attorney's office, not as the sheriff, but as the parent of a threatened child and the landowner of a harassed property. By noon, the DA had signed off on a petition to file charges for false report of child endangerment, criminal trespassing, harassment of a minor, misuse of emergency services. But I wasn't done. I filed a separate notice with the HOA Oversight Council, a state-level body meant to review abuse and misconduct within homeowners associations. Karen, as HOA president, had submitted 5 community enforcement actions against residents without board approval. I cited the bylaws, attached copies of her digital minutes, even showed where she forged a member vote on external property visibility standards. Translation: she made it all up, then punished people with fines, threats, and cops. They opened an ethics review the same day. Karen didn't know it yet, but her HOA reign was about to expire. Step 3. Put a lock on her favorite weapon, CPS. I contacted the Regional Child Protective Services Review Board, provided them with the call logs, the DA filing, and a statement from my daughter, notarized. My request was simple: add Karen McAllister to the internal pattern flag list, a designation that requires supervisor review before any future call from her triggers a welfare check. It wouldn't silence her, but would stop her from using CPS like a hired gun. Now came the best part: letting the HOA see the storm forming. I attended the next Ridge Hill Bluffs Community Board meeting. In uniform, Karen was already at the head of the folding table quorum, flipping through printed flyers about property line enforcement and community behavior expectations. I didn't say a word until they opened the floor. Then I stood, calm, steady, and said, "This week, your president submitted a false report that led to the attempted detainment of a 12-year-old girl, my daughter, on land that does not fall within HOA jurisdiction. That act has resulted in 4 separate investigations, 3 formal complaints, and 1 criminal charge. And every member of this board is now on record as being aware of her actions." Dead silence. Karen opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to debate. I am here to inform. The HOA charter explicitly states that any member under criminal investigation shall be suspended from leadership until resolution. Effective immediately, this board has the authority and the responsibility to act." Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "She did what?" Karen tried to regain control. "He's weaponizing his position." I replied. Then it's a good thing I came here as a parent, not a sheriff. Because if I came as sheriff, I'd already be reading you your rights. The board voted 5-1 to suspend her pending review. Karen stormed out. The HOA vice president followed me to the parking lot and said, I had no idea it had gotten that bad. I looked him in the eye and said, it's been this bad for years. You all just thought the barking was normal. By the end of the week, the local paper ran the headline. HOA president faces investigation after false CPS call. Sheriff's daughter targeted. It went viral. Karen called the station twice, tried to demand I retract public statements. I didn't answer. She emailed the county, filed a complaint about bias. It was dismissed. And then came the cherry on top. A letter from the state HOA board. Your HOA has been flagged for failure to prevent member abuse. You are now subject to a mandatory charter audit and must submit all documentation related to enforcement claims within the last 18 months. In other words, every fine she ever wrote, every letter she ever mailed, every lie she ever sold would now be held up to light. Somewhere around day 12, a moving truck pulled up to Karen's house. She didn't wave goodbye, didn't send a notice, just disappeared. The HOA later released a statement. Karen McAllister is no longer associated with the Ridge Hill Bluffs board and has relocated from the community. We thank her for her prior service and remain committed to transparency and safety. Safety, funny word, because safety doesn't come from fences or bylaws or Karen with her phone in the air. It comes from truth and the will to act when that truth's under threat. The folding chairs creaked as the community shuffled in, sweat glistening on foreheads beneath overhead fans that did nothing but stir the tension. The HOA hadn't seen attendance like this in years. Everyone had heard something. Some only knew bits. Karen's in trouble, the sheriff's girl, calls that never should have been made. Others knew everything, because the article had run front page on Friday. HOA president under investigation after sheriff's daughter targeted in false CPS report. Karen tried to shrug it off like it was fake news. But Ridge Hill Bluffs had seen enough of her real news over the years. Tonight wasn't just a meeting. It was a reckoning. I didn't come to make a scene. I came to show one. Laptop in hand. Badge visible. Shirt tucked. Expression unreadable. Karen was already seated at the head of the table in her favorite cream blazer, the kind that screamed power but smelled like desperation. Her expression was tight, chin up, eyes scanning for sympathy. She found none. Even her own board members kept their chairs angled away from her, like guilt could be caught by proximity. The vice president stood and cleared his throat. Tonight's special session was requested after multiple formal complaints were filed against President Karen McAllister. Due to the gravity of the charges and the interest of the community, we've decided to open this to public view. Karen tried to interrupt. I haven't had proper legal representation. The VP held up his hand. You're not under criminal cross-examination here. This is a community review. The floor is yielded to Sheriff Whitmore. I stepped forward slowly. Let silence fill the room. Then I plugged the laptop into the overhead projector. The first video clicked on. A still image, my daughter brushing clover. Peaceful. Focused. Just a kid being a kid. Then came the voice. Karen's. You don't get to just keep a child out here with horses and no adult. I'm calling CPS. This isn't safe. Yes, please send someone. I don't care who owns the land. The girl is near livestock and wire fencing. There's probably no water. She looks unsupervised. I'm worried for her safety. Then my daughter again, a whisper breaking. Please stop filming me. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen stood quickly. That's taken out of context. She was alone. She was home, I said, turning to face the crowd. On her own land. And she's 12. You knew that. She was near barbed wire. Livestock. She was brushing a horse. With gloves on, boots on, and water bottles in plain view. What you saw wasn't danger. It was freedom you didn't understand. The vice president stood. Let the sheriff finish. Karen's nostrils flared, but she sank back down. Next slide. The 911 call transcript. Highlighted lines in red. The child is in danger. It's unlicensed land. She looked scared. Then the CPS investigation results. I passed out physical copies. The rep from Child Protective Services herself stood up from the second row. She wore no uniform, just a crisp blouse and the authority of someone who had done her job for decades. "I reviewed this call myself," she said clearly. Not only was it baseless, it was intentionally misleading. The child was not only safe, she was thriving. This was not a welfare check. This was a weapon. Murmurs spread like wind over wheat. Karen tried to rise again. She was alone. No adult. "She called me immediately," I said. "I arrived in under 10 minutes. And you continued your call anyway. I didn't know who you were. You didn't care." I clicked once more. The slide changed to a list of Karen's prior emergency reports. 11 calls. 5 CPS complaints. For code violations. 2 police responses. All closed. All dismissed. "This isn't about one phone call," I said. "It's about a pattern. A campaign of control, dressed up as concern." I looked to the crowd. "You've all felt it. The fines in your mailboxes. The warnings on your doors. The way she makes you feel like your home isn't yours unless she says so." Eyes dropped. Heads nodded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Karen had done all the shouting for me. When the presentation ended, the vice president stood. "We will now vote." Karen leapt to her feet. "This is a coup. You're letting him manipulate you. He's turning this into a witch hunt." But no one listened. Votes came fast. Motion to remove Karen McAllister from the HOA board? Aye. Yes. Aye. Karen looked around. "I built this board." "No," the VP said softly. "You just stood in front of it." She stormed out. No one followed. No one clapped. It wasn't about celebration. It was about restoration. 3 days later, the same paper ran this follow-up. HOA president removed after false CPS call. Daughter of sheriff cleared of all allegations. It quoted CPS directly. The child was emotionally strong, honest, and calm under pressure. She showed remarkable composure and integrity. The community took notice. My daughter, once the subject of a terrifying afternoon, became a quiet symbol of boundary, of truth held without bitterness. Weeks passed. The HOA began rewrites of their community enforcement procedures. Emergency calls would now require photographic documentation before being reported to outside agencies. No more solo crusades. No more phone calls in 5 minutes. Just process, fairness, oversight. And as for Karen, her house went on the market less than 2 weeks after her removal. The sign read, "Price reduced, motivated seller." We were not. The ranch looked the same, but something had changed. Not the fences, not the horses, not the slow creak of the barn door at sundown. No, what changed was quieter, more powerful. Peace had a different tone now. It wasn't just the absence of conflict. It was the presence of understanding. My daughter returned to her daily routines like she'd never missed a beat. But I could tell, something inside her had grown sharper. She rode Clover with more confidence, spoke with more intention, asked better questions about boundaries, law, and what it means to be safe and to be right. Sometimes, I'd catch her glancing at the front gate before heading out. Not in fear, but in awareness. There's strength in knowing where the line is, and that you have every right to stand on your side of it. The ranch itself saw new additions. I installed signage at every entrance. Private land, lawfully registered. Unauthorized reporting will be prosecuted. Not angry, not dramatic, just clear. I added motion cameras to the less trafficked paths, not to catch anyone, but to discourage the next concerned citizen from turning curiosity into chaos. Word spread fast. People respected the line now, but the real work happened beyond our fence. I partnered with local schools to launch a community trust and safety program, teaching kids how to recognize real danger and how to respond with wisdom, not panic. We ran sessions on how to safely interact with animals on rural land, what constitutes a real emergency and what doesn't, the importance of asking questions before making accusations. The message wasn't just about justice. It was about accountability with empathy. My daughter spoke at the first assembly. She stood at the front, boots dusty, hands steady, and said, "Sometimes the scariest part isn't what someone says. It's what happens when people believe them without asking for proof. Always ask. Always listen. And always stand up for yourself. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the HOA found a new rhythm. With Karen gone, a new president was appointed, someone calm, measured, and human. They rewrote several outdated rules. Emergency complaints now required evidence or eyewitness corroboration. Any HOA member found using law enforcement for harassment would face immediate suspension. Residents were reminded that HOA boundaries stop at deed lines, not fence posts. For the first time in years, residents started attending meetings again. They smiled when they passed my gate. Some waved. One even dropped off a pie. And me? I stayed sheriff. But I became something else, too. A reminder that silence doesn't mean weakness, that a badge isn't louder than truth, and that if you use your voice carefully, you may never need to raise it. Late one evening, just before dusk, I found my daughter sitting on the fence rail, legs swinging, watching the sky turn gold. She turned, saw me, and smiled. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Hey," I replied. "You doing okay?" She nodded. "Better than okay. I'm proud of us." I walked over and bumped her boot gently with my hand. Me too. We didn't need to say much else. Out here, the land speaks. And when it's respected, it speaks in peace. She thought calling the cops would scare my daughter. Thought a raised voice and a shaky lie could override the truth. She believed power came from panic, from urgency, noise, and the assumption that if she dialed fast enough, no one would ask questions. But power doesn't come from panic. It comes from principle, from knowing your line, holding your ground, and keeping your hands steady while the storm screams at your face. She thought she was using the system, but what she forgot is that the system only works when you respect it. And when you twist it to serve ego instead of justice, it snaps back. Hard. She came after a child. She came after peace. But she didn't count on whose badge she was challenging or what that badge really meant. Because my badge isn't just a symbol of the law. It's a promise to protect what matters. And to make sure no one, not a Karen, not a board, not a single entitled scream, ever scares my family again. Call all you want. Next time, check who picks up.